You have arrived at the K.O.E. Nation. Lethe, did I hear Bible? You sure did. You sure, and welcome. Like, you, sir, are you are a very rare exception here, because normally you need to be Christian or at the very least Abrahamic in your religious devotion to come on to this particular show. But you, sir, I make a rare exception for you for one reason, because whether you want to admit it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you even want to concede it or not, sir, you are coming back home one of these days. Sooner than you might think. You're coming back home to Christ. It's going to be an amazing day when Jesus fills your heart with love and he fills your heart with his joy. Lethe, it's going to be an amazing day. And when one of the elect of God comes home, it's going to be glorious. Now, you are in rebellion now. You are, sir. I was there too. I truly was. So I understand it. But at the end of the day, you know, it's the right thing to do. Come home. I look forward to that day. And I hope you get here soon, because even if all you get in is just your religious journey and we get to chat for a few minutes because you're an awesome guy, and you can give my audience that beautiful, just caramel cappuccino smooth voice of yours, which is why I think you do need to join a church, sir, because could you imagine Lethe could you imagine Lethe reading the Bible at a church with just that baritone, like, Alpha, asking ye shall receive, folks, because we have a run-in here from LetheWaterKai. Can you hear me, sir?
Loud and clear.
Howdy, sir. So, before we get into any of that, when I read that, and I was like, all right, Exodus 20, like, well done, Lethe. Well done. Yeah, like I always like you. You always find the most challenging scripture, but that's what I love about internet atheists. They're so well read on scripture. Like you Lethe, you're so well read, and it's just like I love it. Now, I'm curious, Lethe, if you had a moment to kind of think about it, and the question that I want to lay to you, because I'm going to give you full screen, and I'm going to do one of the most painful things in all my existence here.
Stop talking. Oh no.
Yes, it might actually kill me. You know how like a shark, if it stops swimming, it dies? Like if I stop talking, it might actually kill me. But like I'm going to give you full screen, and basically want you to go start to where you are now. And once you're done, you say, and that is my religious journey. I'll come back in, and because this is going to be kind of a reference piece. And I want you to go to all the bumps in the road. Take as much time as you want, because this is the stuff I like digging down into, and I like giving people time to tell their story. And if there's something that I find even like, I don't, sir, I'm going to be muted. I'm going to write it down, and afterwards, I'm going to ask you that question. So, sir, without further ado, when I give you full screen, just introduce who you are, where folks can find you, and this is my journey. So, folks, this is the LetheWaterKai journey.
Hello, and I have been blessed to be on the Phil K.O.E. show during the Bible study, so very happy to be here. This is my journey from beginning to where I am now. I was born to a very devout family who, at birth, dedicated me back to God, walked the floor with me when they thought I was under attack by the enemy, gave me a children's Bible to read to me every night, read chick tracts to me before bed like Holy Joe, put me in Christian school from preschool all the way up to where I was being taught the word from the very beginning, which would explain why I have a reasonable understanding of what the Bible says. There may be some interpretational issues that come into play, but that's always the fun of the discussion and why I still come back to it. And I want to say it was around when I got to 5th grade or so, 6th grade, the school I was going to, which, we would have chapel and we would have to memorize a Bible verse every week and write it down on Friday for points in class. Eventually, they got us to the point where we would go door knocking and take tracts to people. And this is where I first began to be shaken a little bit. It really didn't take root at that point, but it made me really consider reading the Bible from beginning to end at this point, where I would go and hand out these tracts. And when I'm speaking to people and giving them these Bible verses on the tracts, because a tract is basically a Bible verse, an affirmation, and I'm spreading the good news. And they would tell me certain things in the Bible, like what I'm doing to Phil right now, that were pretty irksome and I really couldn't abide by if it were true. And these things stuck with me. So I decided to read the Bible myself. And my grandfather was a pastor. He hosted a Bible study. He also did Sunday school stuff. And when I would run into problems, and the first one I got to was Genesis 6:3. And the sons of God went to the daughters of the earth, and they begat giants, great men of renown that walked the earth. That verse did not make any sense to me. It seemed a lot like a non sequitur. So I went to him, and he couldn't give me any answers. I went to my uncle because he was also very devout. He really couldn't give me any answers besides, if you're living in a bad way, you're a son of God or something on that order. I don't understand. So they couldn't give me any straight answers. And so I went to Jewish references, and then I learned about Nephilim and other things. So I want to say around 5th grade, 6th grade is when I learned about the Nephilim. And these were other things where it made me start going outside of the Bible to understand what was in the Bible. And it gave me a better understanding of what I was reading. And then I kept running into walls as I'm reading the script because there's just things that don't really track. So upon that happening, I finished reading the Bible all the way through and decided I would try to get some church history involved, and that didn't make it much better because more so the things that I was reading in the Bible came down to the conditions of the time and metaphors related to what was going on at the time versus the way we should be living our lives forever. And the fact that the Bible doesn't update itself became kind of a sticking point to where I felt I needed to look elsewhere. So I started looking into other religions to try to find somewhere to be because I felt like I needed to have some religion in my life. Otherwise, what do I have to stand on? I want a heaven. I want to see my loved ones again. I want all these wonderful things. Until eventually that just did not matter to me anymore because there was no guarantee coming from any of this. So it was probably around my late 20s, early 30s that I almost completely just gave up on it altogether. And then, I went through a period of disability. I was in a wheelchair, all this other fun stuff. And I found nothing to blame for that but myself. I wasn't cursing God or anything. Nothing really put me in that direction. But it wasn't until they were trying to foreclose on my family's home that I started going back to the faith because I felt praying was probably the best answer. And if I'm going to pray, I should try to be right with God as possible. So I made it a point to get down on my knees, pray every morning, and read the scriptures afterward. And I did this for many years until we ended up losing our home and my family had to move in with me because I got an apartment and they didn't have anywhere to go really. And then at that point, found out that my mother had cancer. So I doubled down on my praying and kept going through the scriptures and kept looking to God for an answer or some sort of anything to make this make sense. And my mother was a very awesome person, very involved in the church. And her last birthday on this planet was doing work for Helps Ministry at the church, where she was essentially 1 second, my headphones seem to want to shut down. She was basically working for the church and handing out food. In her last day, she could barely breathe, but she was doing that. 1 second. And I don't fault her for that. She did what she believed was correct in this instance, and I respect her resolve in that. And a couple years later, my father came down with leukemia and was given a 9-month sentence of when he was no longer going to be around. He made it about that long. But by this point, I was already pretty much done. I wasn't praying like I was before. And I just didn't really see anything that was coming from this, because what the scriptures were telling me is if 2 or more gather in my name, all these different things that were brought forward to me to tell me that the promises were going to be true. And where I was before, it just sent me right back to where I began. in my doubting and my disbelief of what I was being told and what I was being promised. So if the promises don't ring true, it's very difficult to stay devout in that sense. So where I am now, I appreciate the scriptures as lore, like I do most comic books and other things. I think they're interesting to read. I think they're a great history lesson for where we've been as a people, well, as a species, trying to figure out what's going on in the universe and trying to, well, understanding that there are things greater than us, and this is our best way of explaining those things. And now I'm just at the point where I appreciate it, but I don't live my life by it. And we're good, Phil.
Well, thank you for that. That was quite the journey there. And I did make a couple of notes here. So one thing that I call a lot of people is something called, like, there's people who are culturally Christian. Okay.
That's what I was.
Well, I would say you even are right now. Because it's the broadest definition, because in that, like, there's people who are culturally Muslim, and even if they don't practice Islam anymore and it's not their thing, when they have to go home to a funeral, they don't have to be instructed as to what are the proper rituals for an Islamic funeral. You know what I mean? And for you, if one of your family members has a Christian funeral, you don't have to be instructed as to what are the proper rituals, if you will, of your family's preferred Christian funeral. Am I pretty close?
Absolutely true.
Yeah, and so to a cultural extent, that's still within you. And from everything I heard, and was like, God bless your grandma, like, to her very, very last, she was glorifying God. And so I've
That was my mom.
Your mom?
Yeah, both my parents passed away within a couple years of each other from cancer. And yeah.
So she was the one that was helping people even on her last, like, then God bless your mother. I have no doubt where she is now. She was glorifying God to her very last, and with her very last breath, she sang the praises of her Savior. Like,
Absolutely.
I mean, God bless women like that. Like that is like that almost brings a tear to my eye. Okay, that's beautiful.
She was an awesome Christian, a very strong Christian.
Yes,
and that's who I was raised by.
And I'm sure, like, there's no such thing as anybody that's perfect, but I'm betting she was a pretty awesome mom.
Oh, for sure. And like, I want to say that was a reason why it was very difficult to remove myself from the faith, because that would be like a slap in the face to her, to be honest. Like, for me not to hold the faith still would be so disappointing for her. And I tried so hard to hold on to that faith just for that reason alone.
Let me ask you, this is not even related to anything I have written down, but it just kind of came to me now. If she was still alive, do you think you would still be practicing?
No. I had already stopped practicing. I just never mentioned being an atheist. I didn't come out as a full-blown atheist until after my father passed away.
Okay. Which, again, big sympathy to you. Like, there's a band, NoFX, that has a song talking about, like, when his mother passed, it was this year, and then this year his father passed, and that was my orphan year. And it's like, and so I'm so sorry to hear about it. Like, and it's like, I'm sorry, man. Like, that's the band's NoFX, and it like, me, both my parents are alive, and it still hit my fucking feelings. Okay, like, it was like, so yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. But to me, like, when I hear some of the things that you said, one thing that I always keep in mind when you're talking about, like, the giants and the such and the Nephilim and all that, somebody giving you a bad scripture analysis doesn't necessarily mean that it's untrue, or somebody not knowing the answer doesn't mean that there's a greater truth there. Because if this stuff was easy, if we were making this up, it would be very easy to figure out. Like, the Trinity would just be like that to figure out. But to me, there was one thing that you said that really stood out to me, that I wrote it down as you said it. And you said, to you, at one point, heaven just didn't become a big deal for you. Why?
Because I don't believe it's real.
Well, okay.
I'm no longer convinced.
Okay. So it's the sin of doubt. But one thing that I have to tell you is that is a sin everyone is guilty of. So don't think that excludes you, that you have a doubt within your mind. I totally understand it. I've had them myself. I had a few years where I considered myself a complete atheist, and I would actually go on to little corners of the internet and argue quite the opposite. And so, yeah, life takes you in many twists and turns. But to me, you didn't say it wasn't true. You said it wasn't important to you. Like this is before you. And so to me, my question is, why would that be unimportant to you? Like, remove what you think about the truth factor, but like, just like, why? Because I think we actually, with that statement there, kind of found a pivotal moment in your life there, actually. And so, because it's one of those things, like, let's be frank. The logical part of your brain is not the most, like, when it comes to faith, you are taking things on faith alone. Okay. Like that's what faith is. If you could just completely prove it, it's not faith anymore.
Kind of have to.
And yeah, like I remember one time I was on a panel with a bunch of folks, like Ty was on there, or Voldemort was on there, Hunter Evelyn, a bunch of folks showed up.
When are y'all gonna patch that up? I swear.
Yeah, we'll see. But anyways, during this panel, that was my argument. Well, if you can prove it, it's not faith anymore. And I thought someone was going to have a counter for that, and no one ever did. Like my boxing instructor taught me, if you're throwing a jab and that jab's hitting all day, don't even bother throwing an uppercut until somebody counters your jab. Otherwise, you just won the match. Like so I was like, yeah, I'm just going to throw this jab all night. But getting back to you, like, I'm really curious, and that was also to kind of give you a moment to kind of, all right, what was, like, because you describe a tremendous amount of tragedy that has piled onto you all at once, and the fact that you overcame
brought me back.
Here's the thing, like, dude, all the things you described, you could, like, and again, Lord, I apologize, be the star and pick me down, New Guinea. I'm gonna curse here. You could be one ornery, fucking pissy, just bummer motherfucker to hang out with all the shit you've been through, but yet you are still bright, cheery, happy. I'm always like, yes, fucking A, Lethe is coming on the show. I'm always just happy to hear, and so to me, that's the way that, like, whether you know it, like, the ways that you were raised influencing you in deep ways. Like, no matter what is hitting you, you will not be kept down from it, just like your mother singing the praises of her Savior with her very last breath, which is, like, you have no idea how immensely admirable that is. Like, that is, like, it's the story of the night as far as I'm concerned. Like, just beautiful. And so, like, just that alone, like, do you see the connective tissue that I'm kind of putting in, sure. where that, because the way that you were raised really put that into, and so even now in your own life, like, ways that you might not understand, because, like, everybody's always kind of influenced by certain things in our childhood and how we're raised, but, like, it sounds like that the right things were imparted at the right time. So even if your philosophy might be different, the content, because like I even said with my daughter, I'm not here to curate the contents of your mind. Okay, I'm here to make sure that you have good epistemology so that you can actually fill it with.
Ooh, that's a great word.
Yeah. She actually learned it from a video about Clueless, and then we watched the movie Clueless and Legally Blonde and all those, like, yeah, love. And so, yeah, we started talking about philosophy through Reese Witherspoon movies, strangely enough. But yeah, so it's one of those things, like, I always say, like, man, like, you know how the Joker always says one bad day? Mm-hmm. Like, where, like, I really see, and I don't want a bad day. I just see there being one moment, like, you might just be walking through the park one day, or you're just having a moment looking at the sky, and you just will have that moment where there will be the shift in your mind. And I just feel that you will come back home someday very soon. And I know you say, no, absolutely not. I was the exact same way, where I said, no, absolutely not. I am steadfast in my atheism, and I shan't not move, and I shall stand upon this rock and not move from it. And I will evangelize. That was the weird, like, yeah. Like, yeah. And strangely enough, Lethe, here you are, evangelizing.
Am I really? Oh no. Uh-oh.
So, like, Lethe, it's like,
We'll
whether you
have to
want to,
fix that.
it's like, Lethe's like, huh, I might have to take a vow of silence. Like, no,
Not cool,
don't,
bro.
don't deprive the world of, and I love this. I'm like, you need to use this. Caramel cappuccino smooth vocal delivery that you have. Like, seriously, dude, if I'm ever doing a project, I'm like, all right, I need some voice actors on some things, you would be one of the first 20 people that's like, all right, he's on the list. Okay. Obviously, like my buddies that are like kind of around and can just come over and sit in the studio. Like, yeah, but then after this, like, okay, I got a guy that can, oh yeah, he'll be
deliver.
He'll be the alien general that'll actually make you believe this guy actually cares about. Like, yeah, it'll be great. But so I really appreciate you coming on, sharing that, and getting deeper into your story here, because again, like,
yeah, it's a little difficult.
The lives that we were told to live by our parents can sometimes be the marker that we try to get the farthest from in life. But this is one where, like, when you say you don't care about heaven, now I remember. We can finally come back to it, because I really want to drill down on this before you got to go, because I know you got, like,
got close to a half hour. We'll be all right.
Okay, sweet. Let me just get a couple of quick comments here. Let's see. Lethe, I can't help but notice you use the word sentence in regards to the doctor's estimate of time remaining. Do you feel like health conditions that develop were somehow given to them by a higher power when taking in? Oh, wow, I didn't fully read. That's a rough question. No. If you don't want to.
Not really. No, it's just a euphemism. When somebody's given a particular, like, I would call it a death sentence in some cases, like you're sentenced to death, you know how much time you have. And so a doctor telling you about how long you have is akin to a sentence. But I'm not saying that literally.
Yeah. When people have a terminal illness and they say, give it to me straight, doc, they have no idea what they're talking about. Right. He's like, no, you really don't. You really don't. But no, like, all right. I really want to get into this for you. You gots to get going, sir. Because so, like the logic thing, like I get, like,
the long and short of the
remove
whole not caring about or even believing in heaven anymore.
We're not believing, because we're not talking about the truth value, because
that's where me not caring comes from, because I was hoping for a heaven. You're always hoping for something. You hope for Valhalla. You hope there's one of these things you can maybe get into, and it's just not the deal. But especially in Abrahamic dogma, in the Jewish tradition, is Sheol. So basically, you end up in the dirt. There is no concept of heaven within the Jewish tradition.
But Jesus says you will be with him and the Father.
Well, that's New Testament. They don't tend to go by Jesus.
Better Testament. But
not going to argue against that. I'm just saying, like, the original concepts of what God set up. Like, even in the case of what was happening before, they said Abraham's bosom was an interesting thing, but that's more New Testament as well. But if that's where the idea is coming from, why would I think otherwise?
Okay, sorry, I lost my place for a moment. I had to go back like 30 seconds. Okay, now I remember what I was gonna. But okay, let's just assume, for the case of this thought experiment here for a moment, that you're putting the cart before the horse, like I'm assuming, where you're saying it's because of the logical side of your brain. But I'm saying, like, when you stopped caring about it, let's just assume, for the sake of this thought experiment, that I am correct, and it did start not so much on the I don't think this scripture matches this Neil deGrasse Tyson theory, but what was it in your heart that shifted when you stopped caring about heaven? Just for the sake of this thought experiment.
I honestly just stopped lying to myself, because I hardly believed in it in the first place, because there's so little of it in the Bible itself. There's no quantifying it. There's no, like, my logical brain took over my fantastical want to believe, hope for the best kind of brain.
Do you think that your life would be different if, like, say, the house that you talked about earlier had gone a different way.
Absolutely not.
So
I probably would never have come back in the first place
come back. What do you mean?
to Christianity and started praying and like going with reading the
If the house
scripture.
thing that you had prayed for had gone the way that you wanted it to.
Yeah, that was round 2.
Okay. So round 1, was that your grandmother or?
No, round 1 was all the way up until I got to about my early 20s and I started seeking out other religions and other ideas. I started studying Hinduism, Japanese, a lot of
heresies crept into your
Japanese stuff.
brain. Well, no, don't get me wrong. It happened to me too. Once you get out into the big wide world, and then you start studying all these other heresies that are out in the world, and it draws you in. Like me, I studied a lot of Eastern martial arts too, and you cannot, if you want to actually learn anything more than like basic white and yellow belt technique, you're going to have to, in some way, there's going to be some Buddhism that's coming your way. Like you can't help that. Like it's just, and so that I understand because now yours was traditional Chinese, mine was always traditional Japanese. So
Well, mine was Japanese. I learned Aikido from my uncle, but I'm being told it was actually Hapkido from Korea. I'm not sure if that's true. I just think his form
if it
was very
actually
brutal.
works to any level, it's Hapkido from Korea. If every time you've tried it in a fight you get the beaten out of you, then it was
no, it's
Hapkido.
highly effective.
Then it was probably not Aikido. Like very old Aki Jiu-Jitsu, that works, but that's a whole different thing. But now,
so like my favorite one that I got into was Gnosticism, and I got really deep into it. And that was what got me to a lot more epistemology and cross-referencing religions and ideas, because there were a lot of deists involved in the Gnostic web.
Yes. Hang on, I'm just looking up the esoteric and the mystical. Okay.
And I think that was the biggest kick in the nuts, because I had to finally acknowledge I'm believing in some woo. I am being convinced by bullshit that I cannot quantify. It just seems really freaking cool. But I had to go ahead and acknowledge that and stop lying to myself about it.
Well, okay. Being an atheist in regards to Gnosticism, A-okay. You're doing great there, buddy. You're like no one's gonna because Gnosticism, to be frank, was kind of like 2012's version of paganism now. Where it's just people who were bored with their, parent religion, trying to find something new, and they try to find something. Like I was actually at a bar last year, and I was arguing with some folks I went to high school with, and they claim we're into Odinism and stuff. I'm like, no, you're not. You're just bored of all the churches that are around here. That's all. That's all that is. That's you ain't found a church you like, and you've been on too many message boards. And shockingly, they also like motorcycles. So I'm sure they have very progressive ideas on just about everything.
Not wrong.
They believe in Odin and they ride motorcycles.
Like I said, Valhalla seems really cool. I'd roll that if I could.
Now, okay, yes, we've all played Skyrim. That's
die
basically
in battle, and you get to go somewhere.
Sovngarde is basically like it's almost like they didn't have the copyright to use Valhalla, so it's like we'll just call it Sovngarde. It's like, oh, okay, well done. But yeah, that's another one that you'll love this. When we were at the bar debating, and I was being a little bit of a what's that? Oh, go.
Be right back. Still listening.
I was being a little bit of a horse's behind, hard to believe, but I was like, oh, well, what do you know? Another pagan religion that the Christ God ground to powder. Ain't that too bad? And don't worry, and I always love dropping this one. Don't worry, you will eventually engage in the longest standing pagan tradition of eventually converting to Christianity. Yeah, come on back home.
So why does Christianity keep jacking pagan traditions?
Because we can.
They just straight up snatched Christmas up. Every ritual.
I was about to say, Christmas is like, all right. The weird thing about Christmas. Did you know that there's actually a Protestant denomination that hated Christmas?
I did not.
Have you ever heard? Well, and here's a funny thing. There's a weird connection. You have an item in your very home at this moment that has a connection to this Protestant denomination that hated Christmas. The Puritans of England, the people who deposed King Charles, Oliver Cromwell, in the Cromwell Revolution in the 1600s, where he ended up executing the king, and then he became Lord Protectorate of England because he refused to take the crown. On his grave, it said Christ, not man, is king. And so he was very devout because the King of England had a Catholic wife, and he was going to allow Catholic forces to march against England and impose Catholicism. So this was betrayal. And so that was... Now, when they marched into battle, their banner had 4 words: "In God we trust." If the Cromwell Revolution would have never happened, we would have never had the American Revolution. And so when you look at "In God we trust" on our money, it's not just a statement of faith, which is important, but it's also a statement of this is the intellectual beginning of the very revolution that started our country, was the Cromwell Revolution. Now, when Oliver Cromwell took power, he banned Christmas. Banned Christmas.
Good
And you know
call.
why? Because like he was one of those folks who, well, no, because he said, where does it say the word Christmas in the Bible?
It does not.
It does not. Like we celebrate his birth as a holiday, but he actually banned Christmas Mass for the Church of England.
To my understanding, his birthday could not be in December. Like that would be impossible.
Like that's,
Based
that's
on the people being in the fields at the time, it would have been snowing and they would have been dead. Not popping.
It really just kind of boils down to there is. Yeah, I've heard people say that it's possibly in March. That I've heard these theories. To me, it really boils down to there's basically conflicting theories on when the census that everybody was talking about in that time actually went down. So if we could ever tack that down, now the problem is, and I said this is Sprout.
Census, that's the problem.
Well, what happened, and we actually know this happened quite a bit, when the Christian church started growing immediately after the crucifixion and started reaching a critical mass, the bureaucracy of Rome over it really had a vested interest in document destroying and basically trying to make these people look like they never existed until the emperor converted. And then everything kind of switcho, presto, changeo. And then it became an official church somewhere. And that's something, because of that early suppression effort, it's really hard to find documentation for some things, which is very unfortunate.
Most biblical scholars say that the Gospel of Luke is erroneous on stating the census.
Which biblical scholars say that Luke is erroneous? I'd like
a great deal of them. Just being honest, you can add on.
Don't get me wrong. Like I get the claim, but that's one of those like
most of them are Catholic though, so I'm like, is he gonna care?
Most of them are like, I get where you're saying. Like, no. Like, here's the thing. Like, Catholic apologetics did some heavy lifting for about 1,000 years. Okay, intellectually speaking, the school of apologetics comes from the Catholic Church, and like, there's things like, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be like, no, I don't use a Gregorian calendar because Jesuit monks made it up, 500 years ago. Like, no, I'm not going that far. So, but like,
one of the primary ones was a book by Raymond Brown, "The Birth of the Messiah: Commentary on the Infancy Narratives in Matthew and Luke." And he was a key proponent of it. There's a few others. Eric Gruen, The Expansion of the Empire under Augustus, which also denies the census. So, like, a lot of scholars say it was pretty erroneous. But
like I said, like what I would counter.
I can't say. I would not say it did not happen.
100%. we do have the problem of, like I said, a very vested interest in document destroying for about a good 200 years. And so that's a big problem. And so I understand your objections, but when you say, like, well, what about this and how do we do? That's the problem. Like, what we have here in the Bible was the things that God wanted to survive through those times, no matter what. And so thank God we at least have that. But hang on. When Aikido is the martial art of Steven Seagal, also known as Bullshido. Yeah, yeah. They want people to think Chris Hemsworth when they think of them. Phil, it's on our money because that trust is worth more than the dollar. Yeah, very true. Yeah, your trust in God's worth far more than dollar. And like Lethe, even with your current belief structure, you'd have to agree.
I can't really say I believe that because I don't believe the being we would be trusting in is even there. And I would think that very being.
But the dollar's worth even less.
So how long have people been having these particular arguments amongst each other, like about what the Bible means when it says this, when it says that? Is this real? Is that real? Is this metaphorical? Is this literal?
Day one of the first one getting put together, probably.
So
but here's the thing: like,
ultra powerful being could make sure that we would know definitively what it wants and what it doesn't want.
Actually, no. Because your and my brain is working on such limited bandwidth compared to what God had. Like, come on, man. Well, like, there's times when you're running into people that you even know, and you're like, "Fuck, what's this guy's name? I can't fucking remember." And you're wondering, like, why can't I fathom the infinite power of God? Like, yeah. Like, have you ever done one of those? Like, you get really high, and then you go into a room, and you're like, "Why did I come into this room?"
Absolutely, but if this particular being wrote on the White House with its finger what it wanted, or wrote on a national treasure, wrote on anything that we would notice what it wanted.
Well, God sacrificed his only son, and the Jews still deny him. So yeah, there's some people that will still deny truth even when it's right in front of their very eyes. I mean, I have a very great, intelligent person that's on my show right now, this very moment, and he's still denying the truth even when it's put right before his very eye. Like, you know, it happens all the time.
So this is the problem with me. I consider the Bible a claim.
You consider it a claim?
I consider it a claim. It's telling me that some dudes did stuff. And then I got other people telling me I have to believe those dudes did stuff. But in some cases, those dudes really didn't do stuff. It's a metaphor about how we should do stuff.
Well, yeah, sometimes Jesus does speak in parables because the masses sometimes can't understand. Like I said, our limited bandwidth. But like, so you think it's a claim? Well, the Jews believe the Old Testament to be the literal history of humanity with God. And the New Testament is a documentation of God's only son being sacrificed for our sins.
So to my understanding, most Jews don't actually take the Bible literally. They don't believe Adam and Eve was the reality. They don't believe. Yeah.
Whoa. Let me stop you there. One day, like, because I've been doing some research into Christian denominations. Then I made a turn into like, whoa. Now, again, you've studied Chinese martial arts. You'll get, when I tried to look up Jewish denominations, there are college championship charts that are easier to understand. And like, okay, think of China and all the thousands of styles of Kung Fu. And how some branch off from each other and derivative of each other. Like, the Jewish denomination chart looks like that. Okay? Like, it's like, whoa. So, like, saying Jews believe, like, trust me, it's like, it's more long-standing than, like, the Methodists versus the Lutherans versus the Baptists versus the Pentecostal. And so, like, I understand what you're saying. Like, the Jews don't believe that. Some of them really do. Some of them really don't. Like,
I'm just saying there's a majority of them that don't take it literal, yet still are practicing Jews. Like, I can't name, like, I've met a lot of Jewish people in my lifetime, and we've talked about this stuff and even like gotten in debate about it. And they're like, we don't take that literally. Why are you taking this literally? And I'm like, that's what I was taught to do. Why would I not believe this was the reality of things?
Why are you taking it? Well, like, yeah, because even like the Jewish folks at the time when they were writing it down, uh, it was their history of man's interaction with God. And so, like, yeah, they did take that literally at the time. But, I guess if they're not living up to all the covenants and all the ancient laws, then I guess they must think that someone redeemed them and God's no longer satisfied with the old sacrifices. So just as well come on to church, folks. Come on, it'll be a good one. Accept Jesus in your heart. You'll love that one, Lethe. That was a good one. It's like, you're like, oh, did he really just do that? He's like, yeah. So, well, if you're not doing all the Old Testament stuff, then obviously you think someone redeemed you.
So one of the reasons why I have to agree with them and I had to let that go. Are you familiar with the ancient Sumerian texts
Oh, yeah.
about
Now,
the Agamu and the beings that formed them out of dirt to mine gold for them and kick them out of a garden, which came long before the Bible existed?
Oh, yeah, I'm very well aware that there's other stories that kind of rhyme with what we have here. So like that doesn't really shock me at all. Now, actually, I have a book over there, a really old one. It was published in 1917, and it was funny. It's like, well, there's chunks of the Sumerian language that are just lost to us forever. Then I open up that book and like, here's a full translation of all Sumerian. We know everything. Here's all.
Why not?
I'm like,
Yeah, we
what
got it.
motherfuckers? These fuckers are lying to us about some shit. But like, so I understand what there's going to be parts in other cultures of things that are going to rhyme with the Bible because the true word of God. Everything's going to want to be derivative of that.
Well, I'm always on a which came first. And so, like, when you think about how people thought about aliens before Close Encounters came out, there was random weird ideas of aliens at the time, robotic looking, whatever, because people saw the day the earth stood still. But then, once Close Encounters came out, all of a sudden you're getting grays with almond eyes and crazy stuff like that. And that became our brains can only really put forward what we have a concept of. If we don't have a concept of what this thing is, and like have you ever read the biblical description of angels?
I've seen a couple of
Enoch, I think.
Yeah, I've seen like the TikToks and stuff of them where they like show you and stuff like
wheels
that.
And wheels with eyes.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, that's interesting. Lethe's like, Phil, I had to read this 642 times. Just trust me on that.
Just bear with me on that.
Like, okay, all right.
So there's no exact explanation of how it was carved, but he was in God's presence. His face was shining, the whole deal from God's presence. And he was up there for a great deal of time, long enough for them to produce a golden calf. So more than likely he was using a rock or something to chisel out the tablets while he was up there and was not able to reproduce them in the same way. I cannot tell you how long it was. It was long enough for the people to think, hey, maybe we need another God real quick. So it could have been 6 days for all I know, but long enough.
Like, I think it's funny, like one guy redeemed Zoomer, he had to put it pretty well. It's like, so Moses is like, all right, I got to go up to the mountain so I can get the law. Don't worship any false gods while I'm gone.
And then he also,
hey, let's worship some false gods.
God told him to strike a rock to produce water, and he got frustrated with the people, so he struck the rock harder than he should have. He was punished for that as well and told he would not make it to the promised land.
Yep. He performed a miracle in a way that was displeasing and not reverent to God, and yeah, that's
and that mirrors the story in the Quran, hilariously enough.
Well, okay. You got to remember, though, the Quran was bits of the New and Old Testament redictated to an illiterate sheep herder in the middle of Saudi Arabia. So, of course, it's going to rhyme a little bit, but a lot of it's really wrong.
Well, they have an entirely different story, but it's more so a character story of how Moses reacted in most situations, which was him not doing the thing that God wanted him to do the way God wanted him to do it.
Well, here's the thing. What actually happened is we Christians today are all Trinitarians. But back in the old times, like over on this side of Europe and stuff, were all the Trinitarians. Over here were like the Byzantines, and then way over here were the Monophysite Christians. And they were the closest to the Middle East. And so all the things that you consider that we know to be inaccurate, the people that Muhammad's tribes would have interacted with were Monophysite Christians. And so his understanding of Christianity was a Monophysite Christianity, like where Jesus is like crucified on a tree, and when Mary's giving birth, she's very distraught and she's clutching to a tree herself, and like, yeah, it's a really wrong way to look. And so that's when you realize that, like, that's where Islam got its understanding of the Old Testaments. And so yeah, there's a couple of heresies in that where it says Jesus isn't, like, there's times where Jesus can like switch somebody out for him. So like, yeah, it's not very coherent, but that was what Muhammad got as a sort of poor version of the Old New Testament redictated to him. And that's
so I have an answer for Bandit. That's a great thing that you put in there. Every civilization has a flood story. That doesn't disprove Noah's Ark. It actually gives it credence. I'm going to say it doesn't because we have an understanding of the fossil record. And at one point, I forget what year we found the Tiktaalik fossil. It actually proved all of our expectations for what we were going to find within each layer of the Earth, according to the fossil record. So we were able to predict it based on what we already knew.
Based on like this thimble full of Earth that we've actually dug into. It's a big old planet, man.
I'm just saying they actually found the fossil itself. It's an amazing thing because they predicted they were going to find the fossil.
The fossil of what?
And it's 375 million year old fossil. Tiktaalik.
Okay.
Tiktaalik. So it's a species of fossil. Like, how do I explain? It's like a tetrapod or fish precursor.
There's stuff that was around before the Ark.
Well,
most of that shit didn't make it, actually. The dinosaurs slept in.
This is actually a transitional fossil that was showing a species that was turning into another species, which proves evolution and disproves the flood. Because those fossils wouldn't be where they expect them to be. They would all be congregating in certain areas. There's no way animals on Ark get let off in one place, spread out, and there's not fossils in places there shouldn't be. To a degree where we'd be like, what the hell?
Oh, so you're wondering why isn't there like one spot where fossils emanate from?
Well, there would be a radiation of fossils because those animals would have died in transport along the way. They would have had kids.
Oh, okay, because we've actually never discovered what was actually the spot where Noah's Ark settled.
And I'm saying
people think it's Mount Ararat, but here's the thing: Ararat is a Hebrew word for big mountain. So it's settled on a big mountain somewhere.
And that's also very annoying, but like the boat itself doesn't even make sense because there's no windows in the plans for the boat.
Hey, he had plenty of prep time. He was like Batman. He had like 900 years of prep time to make this boat.
So that story is more so metaphorical, I would think, and there were regional floods, and they may have felt the world they were in was flooded, but there was not a global flood.
Noah was Batman with 900 years of prep time.
And that was his Batmobile?
Well, okay, here's the thing. Put Batman, a guy with Batman's mind, a couple thousand years ago, and a big flood's coming. What's he going to do with 900 years of prep time? Yeah, he's going to have one fuck of a, like he's gonna
That's a
have
stretch of logic.
he's gonna have the bat yacht of all bat yachts. Okay, like so yes, yeah, like, but hey, that's, I mean, I'm sorry, Moses or not Moses, goodness,
Noah.
Noah. All I'm hearing is he was basically like he had the determination and the drive of like 6 Batmans, maybe 12.
It was God. He was on a mission from God.
Wow. You love the Blues Brothers. I like, see, it's coming.
Why
back.
wouldn't? Oh, come on.
You're on a mission from God. Come on. This is my brother Elwood. Like, oh God, fucking love the Blues Brothers. I grew up on the Blues Brothers. Well,
same here, dude.
We got a full tank of gas, a half pack of cigarettes, 100 miles to Chicago. It's dark out and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
Well, it has been a blast hanging out with you. I hate to have to go. I stayed a little longer than I should have, but it was worth it. And I hope my answers were sufficient and your understanding of my character is intact.
Oh, sir, not only am I even more happy that I have made your acquaintance, and I hope you would say friendships as well, sir, over these marvelous, but like I have a deeper respect for, like, I know where your underpinnings come from. It comes from a very deep, genuine, devout place, and that was how you were born, and that was what you were born into. And now when I see that you're standing on principles, that like there is a very, very strong underpinning underneath it. I know you don't agree with Christianity yet, but it's coming soon. You're coming back home. It's going to be a beautiful day. And like in a couple of years, you're going to be like, hey, Phil, I just bought me my own English Standard Version Bible and I'm going to church now. And I'm like, yes, sweet. And yes, if you do, like, I would get yourself a real Bible. Like that you can open up, like, and so when we do Bible study, you can do that. You know what? I got my own right here, actually, and you can.
Well, I got my Strong's Concordance. I have my what do you call it? It's a John MacArthur study Bible, and my King James Version Bible. So I have a few.
Sweet. All right, bring your KJV because I would love to hear the KJV read in your, like I will say again, caramel cappuccino, smooth radio fucking voice delivery. Okay?
I'm going to bed, but we will do it next time. I will get one of those done for you.
Sweet. God bless her.
Peace out.
Peace.